How can business leaders help their employees focus? I'm Tanya Hall for ZDNet, and joining me is Stephen Kotler. He is the co-founder and director of research for the Flow Genome Project. He's also the author of Stealing Fire: How Silicon Valley, Navy SEALs, and maverick scientists are revolutionizing the way we live and work. Welcome, Stephen.
Nice to be with you, Tanya.
Lay the groundwork for us. What is the thesis of your book and Stealing Fire?
So at the Flow Genome Project, what we study is the relationship between altered states of consciousness, like the state of flow, and high performance. And there's a long history of this. There's about 150-year history of research and science that sort of goes into the relationship between non-ordinary states of consciousness and high performance. What has happened over the past 4 years, and which is at the heart of kind of Stealing Fire, is that most of the major cutting edge organizations in the world, whether you're talking about US Special Forces through kind of Silicon Valley companies, are starting to wake up to this fact. So what you're starting to see is kind of a radically new approach to high performance inside of leading organizations that's built around kind of a what sounds like a fairly radical proposal, but is actually just kind of standard biology, which is a lot of the core 21st century skills, right? The things that we know we need to thrive in this century. So creativity, accelerated learning, cooperation, collaboration. It turns out, and we're really bad at training people up in these skills across the boards. And the reason is we keep trying to train up a set of skills, and what we need to be training up is a state of mind, a state of consciousness. It turns out that shifting our state of consciousness is the very thing that evolution designed our brain to do, to produce more creativity, more cooperation, more collaboration. So it's a really different approach to high performance, but the results are phenomenal.
Okay, with distractions of social media, what are the leaders in Silicon Valley doing to help their employees stay focused?
I don't know who's really doing this, right? Because the addiction is significant. And, you know, it's really interesting. If we forget everything else, we're just talking about flow. When I work with organizations, one of the first things we tell them is, if you can't hang a sign on your door that says, "Can I swear on your program?" No. Blank off, I'm flowing, right? Okay, blank off, I'm flowing. If you can't put that sign on your door, you're sunk. Because the research shows, if you want to shift into flow, if you want to put your brain in the zone, it takes about 90 minutes to 120 minutes of uninterrupted concentration. Uninterrupted means no social media. Twitter's off, Facebook is off, Instagram is off, your phone is not ringing, you're not getting messages, you're not getting email, and you're right, like really, really, really deep focus is required for this, especially if you're doing creative knowledge work, right? If you want to use that state of consciousness flow to do creative knowledge work, which is what everybody in Silicon Valley is doing for a living, you have to get free from distraction, though our society is not, we're not wired for it.
Jason Heiner of Tech Republic just published a story that these combined workspaces are also a distraction. Does that play a part in the flow as well?
So it's interesting. I mean, what we know about flow is that the state has preconditions, flow triggers. There are 22 that we know of, probably way more, but there's 22 that we've discovered. And by we, I don't mean the Flow Genome Project, I mean the research community. And all of them, flow follows focus, right? It only shows up when all of our attention is in the right here, right now. So that's what all these triggers do. They drive attention into the present moment. Neurobiologically, they drive dopamine and norepinephrine, which are the two main focusing drugs in the brain, right? So that's really what you're looking at. And anything that amplifies that is going to drive flow. Anything that distracts from that is going to reduce flow. And when you see these co-working spaces, they're very social, they're very fun. They're probably not great for flow, but I will say, because I just did a whole bunch of work in a couple different co-working spaces in San Francisco and San Jose and in LA. And all of them are being designed with solo rooms. Like they're well built for flow, right? They're really well built for flow. You can get away, you can shut the doors, you can really focus, but they're being treated like social clubs, right? And if you're doing that, of course, you're distracting yourself, and, you know, you might as well have stayed home, right? And you know, distracted yourself with television or the internet. The whole reason you went to the co-working space in the first place was to focus more, right?
You actually worked on a project with Google on this topic. Talk about that.
So a couple years ago, we did a joint learning project with Google, and we took about, I think it was 70 or so Googlers from all over the company. So we have people from facilities, people from marketing, coding, engineers, doesn't matter, across the boards. And we trained them over the course of 6 weeks in kind of 4 basic high performance basics and the use of 4 flow triggers. And one of the things we discovered there, we've learned it elsewhere, but Google was a really great example of it. If you would have come to me 5 or 6 years ago and said, what thing do you believe about flow? Do you think that's totally true? I would have said, God, it's hard to train people in this stuff. It's really hard to get better at this stuff. And at the time, we were only working with like U.S. Special Forces, professional athletes, that sort of stuff, maybe, CEOs. Everybody else we weren't paying attention to. But some of the things that shifted our attention, our focus, and our beliefs around this, the Google example was we tested flow pre and post. It's really good psychometric instruments for measuring flow. And we found that after a 6-week training, about an hour of homework a day, we saw a 35 to 80% increase in flow. That's a huge difference. To put that in context, McKinsey did some research, and they found that most people on average spend about 5% of their work life in flow. Don't really know it. Most people aren't aware of it, but you do. And if you could move that up by 15 percentage points to 20% time in flow, overall workplace productivity would double. Because flow's impact on motivation, on creativity, and learning, it's so significant that you could, just by bumping it 15 percentage points, you could double workplace productivity. What we showed at Google is we could get it to jump 35 to 80%. And we see the same things. We have a flow fundamentals course that's online, anybody can take, and we measure flow pre and post on that as well. And across 8 different measurements for flow, we're seeing on average a 70% boost in flow by the end of the course. So it turns out this stuff is really trainable, really, really, really trainable. So that's great news for everybody. So we can get more of it in our work life, but we do have to shift the way we work to do it.
So what role does social media then play as a flow disruptor? I mean, is it the worst?
It's a distraction. I mean, that's, I don't know is it the worst? It depends.
Aren't you on Twitter in the middle of the night? Didn't you follow the whole raccoon story? I mean, I didn't get any sleep.
I apologize for that. That's hard. I'm sorry, Tanya. No, that was not my experience last night or the night before. But I'm curious about the raccoon story now. What did I miss? But yeah, no, I mean, obviously, and it's dopamine, right? This is a dopamine reward loop. Social media is engineered for, it's designed for that. The coding on the back end optimizes for that, and it's one of the brain's most, it's an addictive reward chemical. Cocaine is widely accepted as the most addictive drug on earth. All that happens when you snort cocaine is dopamine gets released into the brain and its reuptake gets blocked. Social media does that. Twitter does that. Facebook does this. You're looking neurochemically at cocaine addiction, right? Yeah, it's very destructive, but also you know this as well as I do. It has facilitated a level of communication, cooperation, collaboration, open source, this and that, you know what I mean? That you can't, the benefits are phenomenal. The benefits are amazing, right? Building it around the most addictive neurochemistry known to man, that was probably a bad idea. We should probably fix that, right? But the upside is huge. And I'm not in favor of throwing the baby out with the bathwater on this one, but it's like, it's everything else. We often say this in the Flow Genome Project, and people don't like saying this out loud, but a lot of life is addiction management. When we talk about forming a habit is a polite, fancy way of saying an addiction loop in the brain, right? That's what you're doing. You're getting addicted to something, and there's not a whole lot of difference. So we don't like to talk about addiction as a bad name. People don't want to talk about addiction management as a thing that you have to do, but we do it all the time, all day long. And it doesn't allow for quick binary, you need emotional control, you need responsibility, you need a lot of stuff that we, rather outsource and say, oh no, social media is bad and you're doing this to me. No, you need to actually have the emotional control to manage your addictions. That's called life.
Okay, Stephen, how do we help ourselves or our employees achieve that state of flow without cocaine and all of these other things?
Cocaine won't help. There's not a drug intervention that'll get you there. So As I said, there are 20 triggers. So what we see in high flow organizations is they sort of build their cultures around these triggers. And let me just give you a simple example from Silicon Valley. So we know that risk is a flow trigger, right? Flow follows focus, consequences catch our attention. So companies, Silicon Valley doesn't have this problem, but companies without this sort of Silicon Valley rapid experimentation, fail forward, fail faster motto, right? If you're not that kind of company, you're not creating enough space for employees to take the risks they need to drive flow. So if you've got a very conservative company that doesn't allow people to fail, you've got a disastrous culture for flow. One example, if you've got a culture, I said this earlier, if you've got a culture that you have to respond to email within a half an hour and messages within 15 minutes, which is the rule in a lot of companies in Silicon Valley that I've seen. That's disastrous for flow. If you need 90 to 120 minutes of uninterrupted concentration, then those rules have to go. If you have a totally open office plan, well, that's disastrous for flow, right? Follows focus. The other thing at a really simple level, there's a reason 44% of American companies are rolling out mindfulness meditation programs this year, right? Meditation, mindfulness especially, trains up our ability to focus. So flow is a focusing skill essentially. And so basic mindfulness practice, any kind of breath work practice, is you're training focus. You've got to be training that flow. So you're seeing, lots of companies do lots of different things to get out in front of this. It's just going to take a while because our cultures are designed poorly for it.
You know what, Stephen, I think this is great advice. And certainly if we want to find out more information about how to get ourselves into the flow, our employees, or maybe they want to check out your book, Stealing Fire, or anything else, how can they do that?
StephenKotler.com is the easiest place to start.
All right. Well, that sounds like an easy touch point. And if you guys want to follow me and more of my interviews, you can do that right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or maybe find me on social media by going to my website at tonyahall.net. That's TONYAHALL.net. I have links to all my social platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. In fact, if you'd like to talk, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me at Tonya Hall Radio on Twitter. Thanks for watching.